Well, going back to Bomb at One,
Yeah.
Bomb at One, what, now in hindsight, what happened with the release of Bomb at One that at the time, or even the making of it, possibly seemed a little precarious, and now you're glad that it was this way? And then in the reverse, what was sort of a mistake that you won't duplicate?
Well, what was precarious in terms of what concerned me is when we were at Tribeca and we had, 5 sold out audiences, and then we didn't sell the film. So that was the sucky part of it, obviously. And that's what, the only reason you're sitting here talking to me is because that happened. Because if I had sold my film and moved on to something else, I wouldn't, probably have ended up being the person I am now in terms of this, person who's, delved into and thought a lot about alternative distribution models for filmmakers. Obviously the lack of conventional success at Tribeca when we premiered the film, kind of led me on this different path, which has opened up a world of opportunity to me. So it's, I would say the main lesson is that, if the thing that you are hoping for doesn't happen, what might happen is something better, And I think that filmmakers should, all artists should keep that in mind, that it's often the serendipity of life that leads you down the more interesting, fulfilling path. And so, in a sense, it's almost thank God someone didn't buy my film, really, when you think about it. So in terms of mistakes that I made, I wrote a blog for Sundance about that, like the 10 things that I would do differently, that, and now I'm forgetting all of that. Probably because I'm in release mode, and so I'm not thinking about the things that I failed in and only thinking about the good things. I've talked about the t-shirts a lot. That I made t-shirts that were very nice for an audience that was not my audience. So, I should have done some better audience research on the kinds of t-shirts that they wanted. And I made these very nice shirts for people who, women who shop in, Fred Siegel. And because my wife was advising me on the fabric, and, I like those kind of shirts too, to be honest. But it's not, my audience doesn't wear those kinds of shirts. So that's a minor thing. I'm trying to think of, because a lot of it was that at the time, certain things just weren't possible, as they are now. So it's hard to say that I potentially made a mistake about the way I did things then, because a lot of what I did with Bomb at One, I was still operating within a certain set of ideas and conceptions, and through releasing Bomb at One and also Joffrey and working with the filmmakers that I've worked with since, it's a constant process of discovery. But especially, one of the things that I like to do, and what I think that, in terms of the work that I do that I offer filmmakers, is that, I'm constantly actually doing the work. And so not just making films, but releasing films and trying new different things to see what will work and what works and what doesn't work. And I think that's like, I use pretty much everything I do is research, and so, like doing this contest, for instance, to help to aid the release of Bomb at 2 is kind of a research project. And then fortunately, part of the reasons I kind of put it off for a while is because to run a contest, it's very difficult, and it's very, if you don't have what is the structure for that? And then I just happened to run into a guy who had developed, who was working with a company that had developed a structure for storytelling. But then we were talking about it, and I said, well, couldn't you just use this also as a contest platform? And he said, oh yeah, I guess we could. And I said, well, why don't you, because they're in beta mode, and I said, well, why don't you just beta test a contest format with Bomb at 2? And they said, great. And so we're doing it. It'll launch, it should be, by the time some of this runs, it should be active. Like, it's supposed to launch May 18th. And I think we're going to do 3 contests over the course of 3 months. So May 18th to June 18th, and the dates may change slightly, and then June 18th to July 18th and July 18th to August. We'll see if we end up doing 3 or 2. We'll see what happens. You know, but one of the things that, you know, it's good to have long-term audience engagement, but it's also good to have particular points of activity that have beginnings and ends in order to mobilize activity. So while we've been keeping the Bombit brand alive for the last 5 years, and I guess one of the regrets, we've been keeping the brand alive, and we have 15,000 Facebook likes now, which has grown from 2,000 even just 2 years ago. But now I want to use that as well as the influencers that we've kind of like been working with or are aware of or friends with over the last number of years to kind of like push into this one, kind of promotional campaign, as it were. And we're going to see what it's like to run a crowdfund campaign simultaneously, and I'm going to set the bar really low, partially because my audience in general doesn't pay for things. So that's one thing. My graffiti audience tends to not to pay for things. And secondly, I just want to see how those things will dovetail, doing the contest and doing the crowdfund. And thirdly, it's like, we're a little, in a sense, the crowdfund campaign's a little late, in a sense, because it's right before the release. So in a sense, it's more of a pre-sale than anything else, which I know has been done before. But as Sherry has pointed out to me, it's like, well, then what's your call to action, in a sense, and so I'm still figuring that out, what that call to action is. And that's another reason why I want to keep the bar low, because I just, I want to do it for engagement and participation. And in a sense, when I was pretty much ready to nix the crowdfund campaign, I figured actually what's better for my audience, instead of asking for something, is like I give them something. I'm giving them an opportunity, my audience an opportunity to engage and show their work and participate in this contest, and then I'll showcase the winners in a sense. But I think that it might be good to dovetail that if you want to contribute, you can contribute in this way, or you can contribute in this way. You can either contribute some of your work, or you can contribute money. You choose, in a sense. So that'll be interesting. We'll see. It's gonna, I have another week to decide.